So Mick, would you mind introducing yourself, like where you're from and anything else you think's pertinent?
Yeah, my name's Mick Rowdy Bush. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. Um, I'm been working on my business management degree for it seems like forever. Just taking a few classes here and there when I can. I've got 8 kids, so it's time is rough for me.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, we have 8 kids too, and I know we're getting about half of them are out of the house now for us. So that provides a little bit of spare time, but not really because now we're running around trying to see grandkids, and that creates its own set of challenges.
Yeah, I started late, so I've got two out of the house, but then I've got a 10-year-old, a 9, a 6, a 4, a 3, and a 1.
Oh wow. Well,
So
good luck with that. That was hard to do when I was in my 20s. So I
yeah,
don't. Okay, Natalia, uh, um, do you have any ability to speak so we can hear you? Or
Yes, can you hear me?
yes.
Hi, Brother Fox. Well, my name is Natalia Palladini, and I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Okay.
So this is not my first language. So actually, I just got in so I can ask you what advice can you give me because I really don't want to quit the class. So I want to continue this class, and I don't know what's the best way to do it for someone who is an international student. This is not my first language. So what advice can you give me on this class?
Sure. So taking college classes is hard enough in your native language, and it's definitely harder in a second language. Um, so I teach at Eastern Arizona College. That's where my full-time teaching job is, and we get in my accounting class right now. I have 4 students from Mexico, and they have uh, probably challenges similar to yours, where they speak very good English, but accounting terms are very specialized terms. Um, and so they do a lot of googling things to sort of convert words over that they're unsure of. In their case, they're lucky because they have one another too, right? They have 4 of them all taking the same class, and they can sort of talk to one another about maybe things that aren't clear, and see if someone else. It might be helpful if we maybe look around the class and see if we have any other native Spanish speakers, and maybe you can form a little study group that would help. Um, it's just really, well, and you know this, but it's so much easier to sort of discuss things with somebody who speaks your native language fluently. Um, and unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish, so I won't be much help in that regard.
There is any other way that we can just have extra practice? Any other book or any
There
online
is, and I
something
will.
that you can tell me that any extra, homework that I can do?
Sure. Yeah, there's some other tools that I'm actually going to share in just a minute here
Oh,
that might be
perfect.
useful to you. Yeah. And I see Melanie's on, and Melanie, anything you want to say to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm Melanie and just starting with accounting. Don't know anything about it, so it's all new to me.
Okay.
I do speak Spanish, and we're on a Spanish speaking mission. Maybe I could help Natalia a little bit.
Okay. Or maybe she could help you. It'd be a good team.
Yeah.
And then Eric, I don't know.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm from Mexico. I speak Spanish, but I do not know too much about accounting.
You might be in the same boat. Okay. Still,
Yeah,
sometimes though, just it can be useful to have those conversations. I found that
sure.
some of my best learning happened as a student when I would talk to other students, and it sure is hard when the instructions in one language and you're trying to learn it. So I speak Mandarin, and my Mandarin's pretty ugly at this stage, but I can't imagine trying to take a college course in Mandarin. I salute you for the effort here. And then Ohim, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. We hadn't been able to hear uh, him earlier. He's on the chat, and he's saying he can hear us, but um, we can't hear him, so he won't introduce himself. Anyway, My name's Mike Fox. I teach, like I said, at Eastern Arizona College, so I live in Southern Arizona. Okay, so okay, and I promise you I'm mispronouncing your name, so I'm sorry. But Ohim Kim is from Korea. He says it's okay, or she. See, I don't even know from the name context, so sorry. Anyway, so I teach at Eastern Arizona College full time. I live in Safford, Arizona, and I have 8 kids. We actually have 9 because we have a foster kid who lives with us, but my wife has had 8 children, and then we have a 9th. Anyway, so like I said, the agenda for this meeting is pretty simple. I just wanted to first kind of show you some tools that people don't always realize are here in the class for their use. Then maybe briefly discuss some of the concepts from the first chapter, and then open it up to questions. And even though I list it in that order, you don't have to wait till question time. If I'm showing a concept and you're like, whoa, I have a question about that, don't be afraid to ask. And like I said, I'm recording this so that if there's anybody who's at work or something and can't be here, they can watch it later. So do be aware that we're recording this meeting. Anyway, so the first thing, I think you can see my screen here that I'm sharing. Is that correct? Yes, okay.
Yes.
All right. So a couple of tools that people don't use. Number one, in the announcements, whoops, not in the class meeting announcement, but in the announcements each week, I put a link that says additional study content. And what this content is it's stuff that I've put together over several years of teaching this course that some people find valuable. So if you click on that, it just takes you to a Google Doc that's open. So, and for each lecture, for each chapter, there's a lecture that's recorded by me. So it's a little different. And even you'll see that the slides in the lecture don't come from this textbook, it's from an older book, but it's the same concepts. And sometimes it's just valuable, I found, to, you can look at the slides and stuff that this textbook author puts out. So sometimes it's valuable to have another perspective on it. There's usually a self-test. This is stuff that comes from Wiley. And then there's usually a video or two of me working out some B versions of the problems that are in the homework set. So usually I kind of pick the problems that people struggle with the most, and I'll work out a version of that. And I try to put the time so oh, that's 11 minutes. Can I invest 11 minutes? I'm watching my teenage kids, and if they see 11 minutes, they're like, oh, no, I can't do that. That's too much. The new Book of Mormon video, if any of you've seen it, is 17 minutes long, and my kids were like, whoa, I don't know, that's a big commitment. But they enjoyed it, so I guess it was worth 17 minutes of their time. And then there's a quick review for each chapter, which is just me sort of hitting the high points of the chapter. So this is one set of additional study content that's available to you if you want it. It's none of it's mandatory, none of it's part of the required self-study. We have our weekly class meeting, and then another thing people sometimes miss is we have this extra credit discussions. They're not required, so they're extra credit. And just so you know, they're not worth tons of extra credit, and that's because BYU Idaho kind of limits the amount of extra credit we can offer down to about like 1% of the total grade. So it could bump you, say, from an 89 to a 90, which would be in that case a letter grade. But so it's not a massive amount of points, but a lot of people really enjoy them because it's just a perspective on a gospel perspective on accounting, which seems like such a secular field of study that some people find it interesting. And so it's in the discussion for each lesson, and there's instructions in the weekly announcements. And then the other thing, when you go to modules, sometimes people scroll right down to the module we're working on and they miss this textbook access link here, the Wiley Plus Read Study Practice link, which you won't see this instructor resources one on yours because it's only only instructors can see it. So it should be your first module in Canvas. is textbook access, but it's more than just the textbook. So sometimes people think, oh, I understand this without the textbook, I don't need to click on that. But when you click on that, it gives you a number of pretty cool tools. So first of all, for each chapter, it gives you reading content, which is like the textbook type stuff. It gives you what's called Orion, which is personalized practice. So kind of to Natalia's question, is there additional stuff I can study if I feel like I need it? The Orion tool, in essence, it gives you a little quiz, and then depending on how you do on the quiz, it gives you sort of a personalized course of study to strengthen you in areas where you were weak on the quiz. What I have found is students, Orion, as you work through it, it gives you kind of a mastery level, and students who will take the extra time to work to an 80% or greater mastery level almost always score about 10 percentage points higher on the exams than the students who don't. Now there's exceptions. There's people who are just, no matter what they're doing, the tests are hard for them. And there's other people who, the Orion doesn't help them. So what I suggest is like trying it, and if it's valuable to your learning style, then use it. And that's how it is with all these tools. There's also watch and learn. So these are videos that are related to the chapter content by, in this case, like Paul Kimmel, the guy who wrote the textbook. And then there's these classroom resources, which are for the teachers, but it's things like PowerPoints and an audio review and practice sets if somebody wants them. Then there's solution walkthroughs. So these are problems that are similar to each of these exercises or problems, and somebody, again, so this isn't by me, this is put out by the textbook publisher, a video of someone kind of talking you through how they worked out the problem and showing you an example. And there's much more. So I think sometimes people underutilize these tools. And I understand that you're busy, and if you're going through a chapter and you're feeling pretty strong about it, it makes sense to probably not spend a whole bunch of extra time with the extra tools. But as you're preparing for the exam, or as you're kind of reading through a chapter and thinking, I'm not understanding this might be some valuable tools for you. One other thing, and I'm going to send out a link to everybody, there is some online tutoring available too. So if you're struggling, you can reach out to a tutor. And the other thing is I'll set up appointments, and I will provide individualized instruction if you need it as well. So know that all of those tools and resources are available to you. Mostly what I want is I want for each of you to be successful in the course. That being said, it is a challenging course, and students kind of routinely every semester complain about the exams. They say they're hard. So I would suggest that you put in some effort preparing for the exam. So let me go back to modules, and here's one last tool that people don't see. So each week when there's an exam, so I don't know if you'll be able to see this yet. You should, I don't know how far ahead it lets you look, but so there's an exam review module. So I'm going down to week 3, and and when you click on that review, it takes you to, this is just some information about what to expect in the exam. But people miss this little tool right here, and it says review the checklist under exam 1 to determine if you are prepared for the exam. When you click on that, it takes you to a PDF. Maybe I'll also email this PDF out to everybody too, because people miss the link. And this is like a document that breaks down each exam, and then it gives you these bullet points. And I've taken this document, I didn't create it, it was created by the course creators, and I've compared it to the exam, and it looks like somebody seriously went through the exam, and for each question, took the exam question and said, so you can imagine like this first one, know about the 3 main forms of business ownership, including the characteristics, advantages, and disadvantages of each. So they probably looked at an exam question that said, which of the following is not one of the 3 main business ownership forms, and then made this bullet point. In other words, these bullet points correlate very well to what's on the exam. And so if you know the things it's telling you to know, you'll do better on the exam, okay? So that's there. Again, the way you navigate to it is you go to the modules, you go to the week when your exam is going to be. So the first exam is in week 3, and you click review for the exam. And then in the instructions, there's a checklist, and they call it a checklist. And again, I'll also email that out to everybody as an attachment to the little email that's within this Canvas system. So you'll have that tool. All right, I talked for a really long time. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully there was some value in it. Any questions about the stuff I just talked about?
I've got a kind of a question about what you were talking about. So with the textbook, the Wiley Plus thing. So I'm on like the 2-week
free trial, right?
And so if you open anything, you can't. I guess my issue is I can't like look at the textbook while I'm doing like some of the homework.
Yeah.
Is that because of it's because I'm on the trial?
Unfortunately, no. This is a limitation of Wiley, that it won't let you have 2 windows of Wiley open. So common workarounds that I've seen people do is logging in with 2 separate browsers, so that you have the textbook open in one browser and your coursework open in another, like you have one in Chrome and the other in Firefox or something, or you know, you'll see students all the time like taking pictures of some textbook page. Yeah, it's really frustrating to me that Wiley, for whatever reason, I guess maybe it's to keep people from like cheating when they're taking exams or something, but it only allows you to have one Wiley window, and that was not intended to be alliterative at all, but only allows that as a limitation of Wiley Plus.
Okay, that's horrible.
Yeah, it is horrible. I wholeheartedly agree, sir.
Okay.
But I'm kind of powerless to do anything about it. So
Yeah.
I just
I got it. Okay.
Oh, and one other thing in the read, study, practice. Sometimes people miss this. Right here, this little link to downloadable ebook. So you can actually download it, and then I believe you can have that downloaded ebook open while you have other stuff open. And this ebook that's in here, I don't like the way it navigates. You just have to flip through each page, but this is like exactly the same as like the physical text. Whereas the rest of the reading things in the read, study, practice are more like little chunks of the text that put in HTML format. So that's a tool people sometimes miss, and at the, like, because it's like the regular textbook, and you can see that it actually opened in VitalSource, which is a separate, third-party application. You can have it open, and then it also has like all the exercises and problems at the end of each chapter if you wanted to look at them. Because sometimes, like in the read, study, practice, they'll give you some problems. Most of those, the required self-study material, which you've become acquainted with so far, it'll have problems worked out. Most of them match up with stuff that's in the homework, but occasionally there's ones that don't. And so if you wanted to say look up that problem, it would be in the end of chapter information.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So it's okay to refer back to the book for homework, just not on the exam. Is that right?
Homework and quizzes, both, you can use the book.
Okay.
But on exams, you can't. Exams are use Proctorio, another thing, Mick, that people think is horrible. And another thing that I'm powerless about. People hated when we used to have to go to a proctored testing center, so they got Proctorio, and people hated that even more. So that seems to be the way life goes sometimes, though. Huh?
Cost less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
Any other questions about that?
Can you please repeat how you open the ebook?
Sure. So from modules,
yes,
you go to textbook access and click on the Wiley Plus Read, Study, and Practice. And then there's this little link right here. It's just super easy to miss.
Okay.
And you just click on that, and that'll open up the ebook.
Because I tried to do the same, and it's telling me that I should purchase the digital content.
Okay. So it's possible. So there's a couple things. Most people, when they first register, they're on the free 2-week trial of the Wiley Plus. I don't know how this one's set up. Again, that's part of the challenge of teaching for BYU Idaho is they set up a lot of the stuff for us. Whereas in my own classes, I set them up and I know how. And so a lot of times there's an option to purchase with ebook or without ebook. And so to save money, a lot of people will purchase without ebook, which saves money, but then you end up not having the ebook. I'm not sure if that option was available. Other times they set it up so if you purchase the Wiley Plus, it includes the ebook.
They didn't give me the option to choose which one to provide. They just charge my account.
Right. So if you're unable to access that ebook through that link, you're probably going to have to contact Wiley support and say, I can't see the ebook. Why not? Because like on my end, I can't see if somebody has different access than somebody else. I don't have any access to see that.
Okay.
So sorry. I wish I could be more helpful.
I just checked, and it is there on mine, and I did purchase it. So maybe it's because he's in the 2-week thing.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions before I move to some of the chapter material? All right. So the chapter material, I wanted to cover. Let me bring this up for you. So for some people, this will be like total review. Like in their mind, they'll say, "Oh, this is obvious. I've done this before." Other people will be like, "This is mind blowing, and I've never dealt with this." Recognize that that's just sort of like accounting is one of those things that it sort of has its own little language. And if you're used to it, it's easy. And if you're not, it's new because it's hard because it's new. So I just wanted to, this first chapter kind of just gives you an overview of the financial statements. And there's more than 4 financial statements in the world, but there's 4 kind of the primary ones that we use all the time. And so the first one's the income statement. And the income statement just shows your revenues. That's money you bring in by selling stuff. And your expenses, that's money you pay, which is just part of the cost of doing business. And then you'll see this format of this one I have up on the screen. This is a pretty standard format for an income statement where the revenues are listed and then the expenses are offset over here to the left, creating a line for total expenses. And then the revenue minus the expenses is the net income. So in essence, this tells you, sometimes people will call net income net profit. They'll use those terms interchangeably. And in essence, this shows you how much money you're making as a business. Not necessarily in cash. Sometimes we earn revenues, but we don't get paid until later, right? We'll give our customer 30 days to pay or something. And sometimes we incur expenses, but we don't have to pay them until 30 days later or something like that. So this doesn't match up necessarily with our cash, but it does show the money we're bringing in through business operations minus the money we're paying out through business operations. So that's the income statement, probably the most fundamental of all statements. You know, even people who don't deal with business sometimes see these. So the second one is what's called a statement of retained earnings. Retained earnings just means the amount of the net income that the business holds within the business. A business can pay out a portion of their profits, portion of their net income to the owners in the form of what's called dividends. So you'll see the format for the statement of retained earnings is to take whatever your retained earnings were at the beginning of the period. In this business's case, it was 0 because it's a new business. And then you add in the net income, which remember was the revenue minus the expenses. Then you subtract out any dividends, and dividends are profits of the business that are paid out to the owners. And then you're left with your retained earnings at the end of the financial period. So that's the statement of retained earnings. Here that is showing you that net income flows from the income statement into the statement of retained earnings. I won't read that to you, but I'll leave it up a second so you can read it. All right, and don't worry too much about it. Mostly what we want to do is give you an overview of the statements you're going to see in the chapter. The third is what's called the balance sheet. The balance sheet is called a balance sheet because it's going to balance, meaning our assets are going to equal our liabilities plus our stockholders' equity. And let me explain what those things are. So assets are things that the business owns. You can see here, there's cash, there's accounts receivable. That means money owed to us by our customers in the short term. There's supplies, prepaid insurance. That means money we've paid ahead to cover our insurance. For example, maybe we pay for the whole year of insurance, and so that we have the coverage extended to us for the whole year. And then they have equipment. All of those together are the assets of the company. Liabilities are debts that the company owes to somebody else. So in this case, they have a note payable. A note is just something you borrow in a formal way with a written up agreement to repay. That's what the note is. The note says how much you'll pay, what interest, etc. Accounts payable, which is an informal borrowing. It usually arises when a supplier sells us something and says, hey, pay me in 30 days or something like that. You see they have some unearned service revenue. That comes about when one of your customers pays you in advance for work you haven't done yet. It's a debt because you still owe them either that work or you're going to owe them their money back. Salaries and wages payable, that comes about when our employees work, but we haven't paid them yet because it's not payday yet. And then interest payable, which means we borrowed some money, and we're going to have to pay interest, but we haven't paid it yet. So liabilities are just debts that we owe. And then the last one, stockholders' equity, is the most abstract thought of these. Stockholders' equity is the amount of the business that belongs to the owners, okay? And so really, as I said, our assets are going to equal our liabilities and our stockholders' equity. That's what the balance and balance sheet is all about. And our stockholders' equity then could also equal our assets minus any of our debts. That's what our equity is. So if you think about like a home, if you purchase a home for $100,000, I know you can't do that anymore, but let's say you do. If you're in Detroit, you can buy like 3 homes for $100,000. That's where my family's from. But if you purchase a home for $100,000 and you pay $40,000 in cash on the home, and then borrow $60,000, if you took the value of the asset, $100,000, minus the amount that you owe, $60,000, your equity in the asset would be the $40,000, the amount of the asset that you own, not the amount that's owned by the bank. So one way that we gain equity in a company is by contributing money. So common stock on the stockholders' equity line represents that money paid in by the owners. So when people purchase stock in a company, they become a part owner of the company. The second way we can earn equity is for the business to make a profit and that we don't pay that profit out to ourselves. So that's the retained earnings we figured out on the retained earnings statement just a minute ago. So you can see that the stockholders paid in $10,000 plus the business has retained earnings of $23.60. So if we add our total liabilities to our total stockholders' equity, that should balance with our total assets. If it doesn't, you got a problem, which is nice because as you're doing a problem, it becomes a self-check, right? If it doesn't balance, then you know you have an error before you get the problem wrong. So that's a balance sheet. The last statement is the statement of cash flows. As I mentioned up front, sometimes when we earn revenue, we don't collect it all right now. We might collect some of it in the future. Sometimes customers pay us in advance for work we're going to do for them later. Sometimes we have expenses that we pay for ahead of time. We prepay them. Maybe our rent, we prepay it for the next 3 months or the next year. Our insurance, very commonly, will pay for a whole year. And sometimes we have expenses that we incur, but we don't pay for them until later. So because there's sometimes a difference in the timing between when we earn revenue or incur expenses, and when the cash moves, though that'll create a difference between our income statement, which shows revenue and expenses, and our actual cash. So the statement of cash flows reconciles that to tell us how much cash we actually have at a given period of time. So I don't want you to worry about them too much more than that. What I tell people is these first three statements, the income statement, the statement of retained earnings, and the balance sheet, they're like a cancer screening for a business. As you sort of watch trends in these statements, you can sort of start to see issues that, if they're not addressed, could really harm the business or even kill the business in time. And then the statement of cash flows is more like an EKG for a business. This has things that if you don't address them immediately, it's going to kill the business. If a business runs out of cash, a business is done. Because even if your employees really love you, they're not going to work for free. Even if your suppliers really think you're a great customer to them, they're not going to keep giving you supplies or giving you inventory to sell if you can't pay them. So that's the four financial statements. Of course, you'll learn more about them as you go through the exercises in the chapter. In fact, the chapter 1, part 1 is due tonight, right? So you've already gone through at least part of it, I think. And then chapter 2, then part 2 usually takes you a little deeper in. That's how they structured this. They have a sort of a lighter homework due by Thursday, and then a heavier homework due by Saturday. Okay, so I've given that. Now given this sort of overview of the content from the chapter. So now's the time, if you have any questions about things you saw on the homework or the things I just talked about, I'd be happy to address those. So Melanie's good. I think that's what that meant. Yeah.
I think it's just going to take a lot of practice.
Yeah, it's like anything else that's new, right? One of the things that's interesting is I work with a lot of college age students, and every time they try something new that's hard, they're kind of like, oh, I can't do it. And you're like you stunk at walking the first time you try. I'm watching my granddaughter; she stinks at walking. It just takes a lot of practice. It's nice to have a nice thick diaper to cushion you when you fall. I don't know what the equivalent of that is in accounting, but some cushioning helps. And then Ohim says, and again, sorry about the pronunciation, says, can you explain cash flows again? And I will do that, yeah, in just a second. Let me make sure if everybody else doesn't have a question, then if you don't want to hang out for me to explain cash flows again, you won't have to. Anybody else have a question?
I just have a quick question. Is the math for this class, does that go beyond like normal college algebra? Do we need more than that, or?
No.
Okay.
Almost all of the math in accounting is addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There's, now if you have an understanding of algebra so that you can solve, say, basic single variable problems, or set up your own single variable problems, then that's really helpful, right? Because if they ask you to calculate the net income given these other information, you can set that up. But no, nothing. I've never understood why I had to take calculus to get my business degree. Like, I've never ever used calculus at all. Right. So basic mathematical skills, but the reasoning skills of some of the higher math courses can be very valuable.
Okay.
Thinking in that sort of linear way, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, then I'm going to try to address the statement of cash flows again and see if I can make it clearer. So cash flow is just what it sounds like. That means cash that is moving into my business. And so sometimes I will earn revenue by selling products or goods or services to somebody, but I won't get paid for it until later. So because of that, I need to reconcile the difference between those revenues and the actual cash. So here you'll see that this business, Sierra Corporation, you'll see the statement of cash flows is broken into 3 sections: a section for operating activities, a section for investing activities, and a section for financing activities. And then you'll see that this is a very simple statement of cash flows. Operating activities would be the buying and selling of goods, what the business normally does for its normal business operations. So you'll see cash receipts, or in other words, cash that we've received for operating activities, less or minus any cash payments for our operating activities. And the difference between what you've received and what you've paid out is called your net cash provided by operating activities. Businesses also engage in investing activities. Investing activities would be the purchasing of assets for the purpose of doing business. And usually when we say the purchasing of assets, we mean long-term assets, things such as buildings, land, equipment. So any purchase of something like inventory, stuff we're going to sell, that's part of operating activities. But the purchase of long-term assets such as buildings, land, vehicles, and equipment, we consider that investing, or buying into an asset that's going to last over multiple years. So in this case, they purchased some office equipment that was $5,000. You can also have cash receipts from investing activity. Maybe you sell off your old office computers and buy some new ones, and so you'll have both a cash receipt and a cash payment for investing. But in this case, they only have a payment, so you'll see their net cash used by investing activities was $5,000. And then businesses also engage in financing activities, and the financing is the raising of funds through activities other than selling. So anytime you borrow money, or anytime that you sell stock in your company to raise cash, those would be investing activities. I'm sorry, those would be financing activities. And so here they've issued common stock that brought in $10,000. They issued a note payable, meaning they borrowed money, $5,000, and then they paid a dividend, which was paying out a share of their profits to the stockholders. And all of those things provided another $14,500 in cash. So then you add them up, 5,700 minus 5,000 plus 14,500 gives us a net increase to cash of 15,200. You'll add that to what your cash was at the beginning of the period. In this case, it was 0 because it's a brand new business. And then that should give you the cash at the end of the period. And you can check and make sure that matches your cash line on the assets section of your balance sheet. So that was a much more in-depth explanation of the statement of cash flows, and hopefully it was valuable to you. What's going to happen is we're going to focus on the first 3, the income statement, the statement of retained earnings, and the balance sheet in the beginning of this course, and cash flows will come up later because it's a more complex issue than it sounds. That's why I kind of glossed over the statement of cash flows just now, was because we're not going to focus on it for a while. Any other questions I could address?
Not for now.
Okay, good. All right. I hope it was time that was valuable for you. It was for me, just to get to. I just like to put some faces with, you know, they'll put 50 students in these classes, so just getting to know a few of you is helpful. It's just sort of challenging when you can't put a face with the voice and with the name on paper. Anyway, then we can end the meeting here. Is anyone willing to offer a closing prayer for us?
I can.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for today. So grateful for Brother Fox and for him helping us. And we ask you please help our minds to be open to these new ideas and concepts, that we'll be able to grasp their meaning and understanding and remember them. We ask, so please help us in all of our studies and with our families and with all of our schooling that we have. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. I will post a video of this meeting to the announcements of the course. So if there was some concept in there that you were like, I remember we talked about that, but I didn't get it written down, you can go back and review that. The nice thing about video is you can just skip to the parts you need. So, all right, thanks very much, everybody. Have a good night. And then to answer, I see a question here in the chat. I understand, is the ebook the same as Wiley Plus e-textbook? And that's the answer is yes. All right, have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.